I grew up a Star Trek kid, and I will not rest until I see the world as it was shown in Star Trek. And we're getting closer and closer all the time. Under the cover of night and the dark glow of 9 car-sized rocket engines, a new era of U.S. spaceflight has lifted off from Kennedy Space Center. At 2:49 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, SpaceX, the aerospace company founded by Elon Musk, rocketed its Crew Dragon spaceship into orbit for the very first time. The maiden flight of Crew Dragon marks the first time ever that a commercial spaceship designed for humans has left Earth. More importantly, it's the first time in 8 years that any American spaceship made for people has been launched into orbit. The 7-person space capsule is designed for NASA astronauts, but no people are flying on board right now. Instead, the roughly 6-day-long demonstration mission called Demo 1 is bringing 400 pounds of cargo and a female crash test dummy named Ripley to the International Space Station. However, the stakes couldn't be higher. Ever since NASA retired its fleet of space shuttles in July of 2011, the U.S. has relied on Russian rockets and ships to taxi astronauts to and from the ISS. William Gertenmaier, NASA's Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations, has called Demo 1 an absolutely critical first step towards eventually returning crewed launch capability back here to the U.S. Crew Dragon rode into space atop a roughly 23-story tall Falcon 9 rocket. The vehicle launched from Launch Complex 39 Alpha, a historic site from which Apollo astronauts launched to the moon, and space shuttles sent up major sections of the ISS. Next, Crew Dragon must successfully dock with the football field-sized orbiting laboratory, drop off its cargo, and then return its artificial passenger back to Earth. That happens over the next week. If that all goes according to plan, SpaceX could launch its first flesh and blood crew members, NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, as soon as July. SpaceX is no stranger to space station deliveries. The rocket company got its start with NASA in 2010 by developing an uncrewed Dragon cargo spaceship, which has now successfully flown to the ISS 16 times. Dragon's success was part of the reason that NASA awarded SpaceX a $2.6 billion contract back in 2014 to develop and certify its Crew Dragon capsule. Once it's astronaut ready, the plan is for SpaceX to launch 6 operational missions to the space station. I absolutely love SpaceX videos. It makes me think what it must have been watching the videos of the moon landing back in the late 60s. GoEm's Tree now has 2 epic catches on her resume. The speedy, net-equipped SpaceX boat plucked a payload fairing out of the sky for the 2nd time ever recently, during the launch of the Amos 17 communication satellite atop a 2-stage Falcon 9 rocket. Rocket fairing falls from space and is caught by M's Tree boat, SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk said about 75 minutes after liftoff via Twitter, where he posted a 28-second long video of the fairing half settling into GoEm's Tree's net in the Atlantic Ocean far off the Florida coast. There's a significant financial incentive to recover and reuse payload fairings. Each one costs about $6 million. SpaceX also reuses its rockets, of course. The company has successfully landed Falcon 9 first stages 44 times now, and more than 20 boosters have taken to the skies multiple times. The Falcon 9 that launched recently had a used first stage, and the booster had 2 previous liftoffs under its belt. But there was no third landing for this rocket. Amos 17 is a very heavy satellite, and it was bound for relatively distant orbit. So the booster didn't have enough fuel left over to get itself back home safely. Starman back in the news. He's put a lot of miles on his Tesla Roadster in the last 9 months or so. The red electric car and its spacesuit-clad mannequin driver, which launched on the maiden mission of SpaceX's huge Falcon Heavy rocket in February, have now made it beyond Mars. Next stop, the restaurant at the end of the universe. SpaceX posted on Twitter. Along with an orbit diagram, the car's entertainment display was programmed to read "Don't Panic," the phrase that adorns the cover of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Starman, of course, is a cultural reference as well. It's the title of the 1972 song by David Bowie, and Musk said before launch that the Roadster would play Bowie's 1969 hit, Space Oddity, at full blast during its deep space trek, though Starman can't hear the famous tune in the airless void. Ultimately, Musk opted for Bowie's Life on Mars as parting music for Starman and the Tesla. Musk has said that he launched the Roadster and Starman because the duo is a lot more fun than the typical insert mass dummy payload. Launching a satellite or other valuable spacecraft wasn't an option because they didn't know how it was going to turn out given the risks inherent in maiden flights. Starman and his ride, which once belonged to Musk, won't stay beyond Mars forever though. As you can see in the diagram, the pair will loop back on their heliocentric orbit, eventually coming about as close to the Sun as Earth does. The Roadster and Starman will come within a few 100,000 kilometers of our planet in the year 2091. According to an orbit modeling study. The authors of that study, by the way, determined that the car will slam into either Venus or Earth, likely within the next few tens of millions of years. You can track the Space Mannequin and Cosmic Tesla at whereisroadster.com. The Falcon Heavy's second mission, which will launch the Saudi Arabia communication satellite Arabsat 6A to geostationary orbit, is scheduled for January of 2019. SpaceX is revisiting its satellite internet initiative, Starlink, and it now hopes to operate some of its spacecraft at a lower altitude than originally planned. In a filing to the FCC, SpaceX is now asking the agency to modify its license so that more than 1,500 Starlink satellites can operate at an altitude of about 600 kilometers lower than the company originally requested. SpaceX argues that this change will make the space environment safer, as it will be easier to get rid of these satellites at this new altitude when they run low on fuel or can no longer function properly in orbit. This update could also explain the unexpected behavior of two of SpaceX's test satellites for Starlink, which have remained in lower orbits than expected. Back in March, the FCC approved SpaceX's license for the first phase of its ambitious Starlink initiative, the company's long-term plan to launch nearly 12,000 satellites into orbit to beam internet coverage down to Earth. Initially, SpaceX asked for permission to launch satellites into orbits higher than 1,100 kilometers, but with this new filing, SpaceX is requesting that 1,584 satellites be allowed to operate at 550 kilometers instead. SpaceX said that moving the satellites to a lower altitude means that it can do more with less. Originally, the company said it needed 1,600 satellites, but moving them lower means that the company can get to the same results with 16 fewer spacecraft. And the lower altitude makes it easy to dispose of these satellites once they're done in space. At this height, particles from Earth's atmosphere bombard the spacecraft more rapidly, pushing them out of orbit and dragging them down to the planet. And on the way down, well, they burn up in the atmosphere. Making sure these spacecraft come out of orbit in a timely manner is crucial because of the vast number of the things that SpaceX wants to put in orbit. A constellation the size of Starlink could dramatically increase the number of operational satellites in space, raising the risk of in-space collisions. SpaceX's Starlink internet satellites will soon sport an accessory to tamp down their surprising brightness. That brightness worries many astronomers who say that the huge Starlink constellation could seriously disrupt a variety of scientific observations. And Starlink will indeed be huge. If all goes according to SpaceX's plan, the company has approval to launch 12,000 craft to low Earth orbit, that's LEO, and has applied for permission to loft about 30,000 more. For a little bit of perspective, humanity has launched just 9,400 objects to orbit since the dawn of the space age way back in 1957. SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk has said that the company will find a way to make Starlink craft fade from scientists' sight, predicting that the constellation will end up having no impact whatsoever on astronomical discoveries. Now, SpaceX has been working with the astronomical community to make this happen, researchers say, and the company has already tried some mitigation measures. I'll let you know more when we hear more right here on your weekly tech update.